Oh hell, Internet, it's time to talk about capitalism. And while this will be to some extent a critique, I want to be clear that I will defend markets, the idea of markets, and given that, I will be defending the idea of rich people as an abstract concept. I will be perhaps altering that concept slightly, but please try and stick with me. This is intended to be a good faith argument. Okay, I will cut to the chase. Capitalism is the system that most of the world uses as an economic distribution system today, including places like China. Now, they may have other communist leanings in other ways of the government, but, there are very rich people, very powerful people, and very poor people. There is some capitalism going on there. In the limiting case of capitalism, the individual person has absolute power over their resources and the way they are applied, and any way that they can apply those resources in order to acquire new resources is therefore morally justified. And unregulated, capitalism leads to an eventual point of one person owning 100% of the resources. Yes, it does. Capitalists who are scoffing right now, it does. In the abstract limit. Of course, in any real system that would never happen, but we can see very clearly that whenever regulation is taken out of the equation, the distribution of resources in any given system marches in one direction, and that is towards monopoly. And thus we need more regulation. And to be fair, most capitalists say that there should be some regulation. The sensible ones do anyway. But the more complex your society gets, the more regulations there will be. Period. More complexity, more regulations. And there should be regulations to protect resources as well. The police are a very necessary and important part of this process. But that's how it works. More complexity, more regulation. There's the old quote, the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. Yes, there is such a thing as bureaucratic inefficiency and incompetence, and unfortunately that is something that may always be with us. However, that is not an inherent indictment on the very idea of bureaucracy and regulation. Another point about wealth distribution is the idea of hierarchies, which the right wing often defends in defending wealth inequality. And believe it or not, I'm going to agree with the right in some ways in defending hierarchies as a form of delineation. You have to be able to create a spectrum of options in order to create any diversity at all, the way I see it. However, they don't tell the whole story on the right, do they? They don't say where those hierarchies should be pitched. There is a principle which is used in other parts of reality very often, and I have seen brought out by the right wing to defend wealth inequality, and that is the Pareto distribution. Broadly speaking, and this is surprisingly well studied, given a complex system and all other things being equal, 80% of the outcomes of the system will come from 20% of the inputs, with some variation around that. And that is ubiquitous enough, it seems, to at least be a candidate for the idea of wealth distribution. And that would suggest that 80% of all resources and wealth should be in the hands of 20% of the population. And this is recursive. So 80% of the 80% would be in the hands of 20% of the 20%. And so there would still be phenomenally rich individuals and mass individuals, corporations, in any Pareto distribution of wealth. But what do we have right now? The number is argued, but well known to be over 90% of the wealth in the hands of less than 5% of the population. That's the way it works. Now, I'm sure that various right-wing economists could bring the spin hammer down on that one. Stop hiding behind your arcane sophistry. Look around at the world that exists from outside your bubble. The modern mass society has changed the game. It is entirely possible that you can be born in this world as an individual person and be, through some misfortune, unable to do productive work. You should at least be allowed to sit there and do nothing much. Maybe inspire other people as you go through life until you shuffle off this mortal coil. And wealth distribution, something akin to the Pareto principle, would absolutely make this possible. The counter-argument here is sometimes that this would somehow affect the system of incentives which drives human productivity, that people would become less inclined to do anything productive because they no longer have to worry about, providing for their own survival. I think this is demonstrably untrue. There are plenty of people who no longer have to worry about their own survival who still do productive things. Even if that is true for a minority of people, so what? Who cares? And as I said before, there will still be fantastically rich people, so there will still be something to strive for, more opportunities, even if you're purely motivated by materialistic desires. Speaking to the capitalist, no one is saying that the generation of new ideas and the work necessary to put them into practice does not require a lot of effort and so potentially provide some reward. But no one is special in the highest sense, and to actually do innovation requires time, resources, reliable resources, and an enduring sense of personal security. So if you are even half serious about a genuine meritocracy, then I would say UBI, free healthcare, free tertiary education, and yes, guaranteed free internet access is the barest minimum that you can provide in a modern mass society to encourage innovation to continue at all levels. The second thing I would say to the ardent capitalist is that the modern mass society has made money the primary resource. It is the convergent instrumental goal of the majority of humans in some form or another. This means that an individual's implied worth in the modern mass society is represented by the amount of it that you have, the amount of money that you have. Now, don't get your panties in a bunch. Again, I am not looking for some kind of communist distribution. There are still going to be people who have a shitload. But the idea that if you are going to be a member of society at all, you need a base level of resources does not seem to me to be a controversial one. In a Pareto wealth distribution, there would still be all the strata of society that there are now, except one. There will be far fewer desperate people. It seems to me that sometimes the rulers of the capitalist system want there to be as many desperate people as possible. They might use the word hungry. Mitt Romney once said that America was a country of haves and soon-to-haves, which is a laughable statement on its face under capitalism, and always was. And I don't even think Mitt Romney in himself is that bad a person, although I will say he has the benefit of a very low bar. But it's just like any religious devotee. They lack the ability to critically analyze their creed. And I am not talking about Mormonism here. And this is why people say capitalism is broken. It's not some nefarious plot to demolish the individuality of a free society. For fuck's sake. Capitalists like to say the markets will decide. No, they don't. Markets don't decide anything. Markets are mindless. They are a tool for creating complexity in an advanced system like the modern mass society. But they are machines. And that is not their failure. We should allow them to keep doing what they do in a mindless way. But the things which actually require us to make decisions about, well, how do we ultimately want the individual to be treated? Those are not mindless questions. And if we allow unregulated markets to just continue doing what they do, then we drive towards the end state of capitalism. One person owning 100% of the resources. The capitalist could come back and say, well, unregulated government ownership is equally bad and will perhaps drive towards the limiting case of communism, which we will see in the next part. I'm not even sure I fully agree with this, but if I grant it, then yeah, fair enough. There should be regulation going in both directions. We're finding a balance point between two systems. Whether it's the Pareto distribution or whatever, more complexity in the system will lead to greater amounts of regulation to establish that balancing point.